Hello and welcome to 100% Real with Ruby. You'll never guess who's back. Back again.
It's
Tom
me.
is back. He's back again. And this is one that has been spoken about way too often. I guess social media once again is to blame. They are preying on the vulnerable 35 plus year olds, 40 plus year olds, especially those closer to their 50s who feel like nothing is working for them, their body isn't changing, and they need this special protocol. Or on the other hand, they're these special snowflakes that need to be training in a certain way. And it's very easy to believe them when you feel like your body is breaking down on you. When you feel like cortisol is now the enemy because of your hormones and you need to train in a certain way or do things specifically to avoid more hormonal and metabolic chaos. Now, Tom and I both kind of come at this from the very same angle. One of the biggest reasons, I think, I'll let you suggest your biggest reason, and then what we think is the biggest missing piece. The biggest reason, I think, is because most women are doing way too much of the wrong things in their training, either not resting enough or they haven't learned how to build up they haven't built up a solid foundation to start with. They haven't learned the bracing. They haven't got the hip mobility to be doing certain exercises and haven't built up to that particular thing. So then they're put into compromised positions that lead to them feeling like their body is breaking down. So it's really easy to believe what people are saying. However, if you are on a smart program that takes into account your recovery, and recovery isn't just rest days from the gym. Recovery is your sleep, it's your stress management, it's the nutrition that you eat as well. And I don't know whether you see it, but I think a lot of women undereat their protein, and that has a lot to do with your ability to recover from the sessions, but also under eating your calories has a lot to do with your recovery from the sessions. And I would add on the last note, if you are training smart and if your stress is managed in your daily life, like a smart training program takes into consideration your ability to adapt to that training program. If you have a lot of life stress going on, then it will make sense that your training needs to suit that, because you're not going to be adapting at the same rate that, number one, someone younger would to start with. So then you need to be a lot more on top of these lifestyle things so that you can adapt from what is given upon you. And a lot of people think that they need a lot of shit to get the results they want. But I would argue that if you can learn how to get more out of less, you will get way more benefits from it. Take it away.
100%. I think there are two broad themes that you picked up on there that always pervade women's fitness, but especially seem to pervade women's fitness for those who are of like 35, 45, 50 and above. And this is, first off, that idea that you need way fewer calories than you actually need. Like I've worked with so many women of around that age who are like genuinely really afraid of eating more than like 1,500 calories. And it's because women of that age have been told that they need to diet, that they need to eat less, that they need to be smaller. Many of them for like 5 decades now. And breaking that's really difficult. And I appreciate breaking that's really difficult because it's something that's been battered into you from every aspect of society, essentially forever. But you, whether you're man, woman, 12, 102, you're not unique. You don't break the laws of physics. Like if you want to do something, you need to provide your body a sufficient amount of energy to do that thing. And I often find that when women in, whether you're post-menopause, pre-menopause, or even perimenopause, if you can get comfortable eating a little bit more so that you're not always slightly in a calorie deficit, you'll be able to train way harder, you'll feel way better, and it just unlocks this ability for you to actually start feeling like you're thriving instead of just surviving and trying to be smaller. The other thing that I think you mentioned is probably the most important aspect of training for people generally, but also for people in this area. When we're lifting weights in the gym, the goal is to use every single set that we do to force our body into adaptation. And that means that those sets need to be really quite intense. Now, that intensity is a skill that you'll develop over time. You have to learn how to train hard. So the first time you come into the gym, you might find that you push yourself as hard as you possibly can, and that's class. But 6 months down the line, you will be able to push yourself harder than that. So there needs to be some amount of patience here. You can't expect yourself to be absolutely flying at the beginning. But what I often find is when we get to this idea of, well, like weight training doesn't work for me, or I haven't noticed any benefit, people are doing way too much, but they're also simultaneously not doing enough, in that they will do 4 or 5 sets of 7 or 8 different exercises, but the intensity is really low. So you'll do the exercise, let's say you're on a chest press, and you'll go until you start feeling a burn in a muscle, then you'll stop. But you were 8 to 10 reps from failure there. And so you feel like you need to do 5, 6, 7 sets in order to feel like you've done some work, in order to feel like you've trained. And if you can get as much as possible out of 2 or 3 sets of 3 to 5 different exercises, not only will your sessions take way less time, which means you've got more time to do other things, you'll get significantly more benefit from that. And we know all the benefits of training for people in and around the menopause, Ruby. So take it away. What are the primary benefits that people should be expecting from training during the menopause?
Something that you actually just said there, weight training doesn't work for me. It's what are you relating to works for you? Like, what are you looking for? What is your metric of progress? There is so much more to this than just the aesthetics of it, but the aesthetics of it are a byproduct of you putting in the work through menopause, through your aging. As you age, you're better able to tolerate all the other stresses that come on. Your ability to then muscle mass. What is muscle mass for? You can store a lot more glycogen, you can store a lot more carbs. That will allow you to have a lot more energy through the day that is sustained, because your blood sugar levels are going to be a lot more balanced. And that, in a sense, is going to help with the menopausal symptoms. Now, a lot of women feel like that they need to tone it back down, or that, like you mentioned, it doesn't work, or like no matter what they do, it's their hormones that they're gonna inevitably gain belly fat.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, okay, for a certain period of time you will see a gain in belly fat, but that's just because of your hormone shifting. So it's going to that midsection. But the thing is, you can still get rid of that through the foundational practices that you learn in the process. But if all you're focused on is exactly what Tom said, losing weight, shrinking yourself, you haven't given yourself enough chance to build the muscle that is going to keep your metabolism ranked up on, like, to the level that it was before. Because the stronger that you are, this is the main benefit. The stronger that you are, the more ability that you keep that skill to train intensely. You will still be burning a lot more calories in those sessions, even though that's not the purpose of it. But now you're going to continue to burn more calories outside of the gym, which is the main reason that people complain going into the later stages of their life, because they feel like everything just sticks to them. Well, no, continuing to build your body is exactly the thing you need to stay away from that. And it doesn't mean going to now old people training. It's like, no, it's the same training you did before.
Yeah, and I get why, and it would be totally weird if it wasn't the case. I fully understand why, when women get to the menopause and they start to notice that they're gaining fat around their stomach, I get why that's scary, because this is not something that most women have to deal with to that same extent. throughout the rest of their life. And the reason that that happens is just because of, as Ruby says, it's hormonal shifts. So generally speaking, male fat storage patterns are that men store their fat primarily around their pecs, around their lower back, and around their organs in something called visceral fat. Women tend to store body fat around your hips, around your thighs, and around your upper arms. As you go into menopause, because of a reduction in estrogen, that body fat distribution shifts and you do start storing more fat around your waist. But that's not the same as saying you're gaining more fat. It's the same as saying that the fat that you have, or the fat that you would have gained anyway based on the habits that you're now living with, it's going to your stomach, as opposed to 10 years ago, it would have gone to your thighs, it would have gone to your hips, it would have gone to your upper arms. And as Ruby says, like, this doesn't mean that you are like doomed to gain this body fat. That is not how that happens. It's not how that works. But it is to say that it's something that you may want to keep in mind. It's something that you may want to avoid, and there's nothing wrong with that. But the way that you avoid that is the same way that you would have avoided 15 years ago gaining fat around your hips, thighs. It's eating in a way that is appropriate for the energy expenditure that you have, and it's trying to stay active. It's doing some cardio, it's doing a lot of resistance training, it's getting strong, it's building a physique. And building a physique doesn't have to mean you want to look like a bodybuilder. It just has to mean that if you're wanting to have physical independence into your 80s, if you're wanting to be able to get up out of a chair, if you're wanting to be able to reach down to pick stuff off like the lower shelves or get things out of low cupboards in the kitchen, that you need to build and maintain the muscle mass that's required to get there. And along the way, what you'll find is that because you're building muscle, because you're exercising in a way that's appropriate, and because you're eating well, that sudden spare tire that people refer to, like it's not going to manifest. It's not going to manifest in the same ways it otherwise would have done. Like, these things are propensities. They're not like inevitabilities. And I think a lot of the messaging around the menopause is really disempowering, because it kind of implies that you're just doomed to have this, and it's just not the case.
There are so many common beliefs around aging and this. Well, yeah, the training element, but this comes into it. There are so many common beliefs around aging and calorie deficits, and people are like, well, I'm older now, I need less calories. I'm older now, it's not the same anymore. And it's like, well, yeah, you will need less calories if you continue on the same path that so many women have been bought into, because it's alluring. The fact that most of it's really sad that it's like, if you look around the gyms now, it's like a huge thing that people are wanting to build muscle. People are chasing strength. It's like a new thing now. But way back then, for the people, like the women in menopause now, was subject to the shit that was going on in the 1990s. And in the 1990s, it was all about thin and nothing to do with muscle. So the more muscle that you have, the more active that you are. Things have changed. And I hate microcalculators for this very reason. Your calorie intake is not just based on your height and your weight and your age. It's based on your muscle mass and your activity levels as well. So if you're going to stay more sedentary, if you're not, here's the thing, your whole NEAT, which is NEAT and steps, are two different things. We've spoken about this on a prior Tom and Ruby episode. But your NEAT in general, how much you move, the amount of energy that you require to do the same amount of activity is going to go down the less muscle mass that you have, just for the sheer fact that it's muscle. But the 60-year-olds of the 1990s moved like snails. You are not going to be a snail of the 1990s if you're someone who still prioritizes strength and muscle. Overall fitness is going to keep you young, it's going to keep you fit, and it's going to keep you firing up your metabolism. I have someone in her 50s who's eating around, here's one to add into this, because I guess we're just going to make this about the older population. And I hate saying older, because the older population is like the 90s now, because we're living longer. And that's the thing, like, do you want to live like a crippled, what are those bugs, like Christmas bug? Do you want to live like a crippled Christmas bug into your 90s, if you can even make it through that long without breaking in half? Or do you want to make it through the rest of your life with vitality, with strength, with independence? Like all of this Tom just said, but I'm reiterating it because this is like nothing changes unless you make it change. And something that I found is that when women over 45 take a long break away from strength training, that's when the niggles show up. That's when the knees start to get niggly. That's when the hips start to have issues. That is how important strength training is. And Tom is also a very big fan of plyos for this very reason, because what fibers do we lose? Our type 1 muscle fibers. So it pays to do that. And I know that you actually wanted to bring in this, the myth of women need to do hits, and doing long form running duration is bad for your cortisol. Well, mate, if we stopped worrying about what our cortisol is going to do from the exercises that we do and start caring more about our stress management and our sleep and actually eating enough food and not shying away from carbs, like that is the issue for cortisol. It is not the training. It is not the cardio. If anything, I would argue that HIIT is the worst thing for women over the age of 30, well, over the age of 40. Because number one, like try doing HIIT properly. It's more like just random bursts of on and off stuff. And number two, you're better off just doing long form zone 2 duration, because that's the best form of cardio for the heart at its base level, and you recover easily from it. We were just talking about how hard it is already for you guys to recover. In menopause, it's even harder for you to recover because you got hormonal fuckery. You're not sleeping as well because you have night flashes. You have night sweats, I was supposed to say. All of this thing accumulates into the experience that you're having.
Yeah, and like the idea that women have to do HIIT training and you can't do zone 2 training, it just pisses me off. And it pisses me off for a couple different reasons. The first one is, right, I've got a paper here, The Effective Aerobic Training on Menopausal Symptoms, by Jana Moilanen and colleagues back in 2012. But in sedentary women, aerobic training for 6 months decreases the typical menopausal symptoms, especially night sweats, mood swings, and irritability. Then you've got the paper here. Exercise training improves mitochondrial respiration, is associated with altered intramuscular phospholipid signature in women with obesity. I'm not going to read that paper. You can kind of tell from the vibe of the title. Basically, we have this huge body of literature which shows that whether you're premenopausal or perimenopausal, if you're not doing anything, if you start doing aerobic exercise, your symptoms improve if you're menopausal, and your overall health and the way that your body works improves if you're not menopausal. And so while we might be able to say that if you are a woman, if you were to focus instead on doing some resistance training, then that would be better. And I would agree with that idea. The constant fear-mongering to try and get people to stop doing zone 2 exercise, it's just scaremongering to sell books. And it's not evidence-based, because we have a vast body of literature which shows that there are some benefits to this. And we need to place this in the context of the fact that most adults don't exercise. So if for you, going to the gym and going on the treadmill or going on a bike or going on a cross trainer or a stair mill or whatever is a less scary concept when you first start exercising than going into the weights room and doing lifting, you would be infinitely better off if you went and did that cardio exercise, rather than thinking, oh, well, cardio exercise is bad for women. I have to do HIIT training and weights. I don't want to do that, so I'm not going to fucking do anything. I think it's just, it's way too hardline, and I think it's massively counterproductive. I would agree that women would be better off doing lifting weights rather than just doing cardio. But if you just do cardio, you'll be way better than if you're not doing anything. And I think there are too many people in this industry that want to create this massive barrier to entry just because, well, they have the secret and they want to sell books. And if you buy their special protocol, you'll be better because you're a woman. I hate the phrase, women are not just little men, because it's true. Women are not just little men, but women are also not Martians. Like, let's not pretend that we work that dramatically differently. Like, there are some fundamental principles that exist, and one of them is that cardio training is really good for you.
Yeah, I will kind of add it's not really going against what you said, but I would still add this little counter argument for you guys to realize, if you do just do cardio, you need to be okay with the trade-offs, such as a shrinking metabolism, looking softer, maybe actually getting.
I don't agree. Like, look at any high-level female marathon runner. Do they look softer? Do they have a shrinking? No.
But
What
it's
we're
like,
talking about here is doing excessive cardiovascular activity and not eating enough.
yeah, it's the
If
eating
you're
up
if
you
you're gonna eat
enough to
if you're gonna
recover.
eat 700, yeah, if you eat 700 calories and do 2 hours of training every day, I don't give a shit whether you're doing aerobic training or whether you're in the gym. Like, if you're lifting weights for 2 hours every day and eating 700 calories, you're gonna end up with a shrinking metabolism. You're gonna end up looking softer. You're gonna end up feeling like shit. Um, if you are someone that wants to push your cardio, just do that. It's fine. You'd be better off. Make sure you're eating enough protein. Make sure you're eating enough calories. But like, there's nothing wrong with that. I think that there is a great degree of benefit in doing some resistance training alongside that cardio. I think the evidence is really clear there. But if you're sat on the couch right now thinking, I don't know where to start training, or I'd love to start training, but lifting weights is scary, I just feel like I would like to do cardio, use that comfort blanket. Do it for a year. After a year, you might get a bit more curious. You might start lifting weights again, and that would be more beneficial. But like, I don't like this messaging. Or if you just do cardio, you're gonna end up soft and you're gonna end up with a shrinking metabolism, because I don't see any evidence of that. All I see is there are lots of people who do, like, they do running clubs, they train for marathons, they train for ultra endurance events, and they're way healthier than people on the couch. And I just think that
Yeah.
I don't think it's good messaging. Like, as I say, would there be benefit to doing resistance training as well? Yeah, for a ton of different reasons. But if you're sat there thinking, well, I'm not going to do that, you'd still benefit from running.
Yeah, I will actually add on running in itself, because you are bearing your body weight on the pavement as you run. That is still maintaining some form of muscle, but you
Yeah,
cannot you cannot expect to be building muscle sufficient for age, like for the aging, for that independence, for the strength that we were just talking about prior, if you're not going to do the strength training. But if you are in a period of your life where your symptoms are unbearable for going into the gym and lifting some weights, get in the cardio, because that is where your greatest, even though I said shrinking metabolism, well, I mean, you will have a shrinking metabolic engine, but the cardio, the activity, that is the metabolism there for itself. So if you're unable to go do your training, that in itself is going to help keep you healthier. And muscle mass has, like, there's such thing as healthy muscle and unhealthy muscle. You're able to have a healthier metabolic state by doing the cardiovascular work, by doing anything that gets you more active, because the worst thing you can do is stay sedentary. There's a plethora of research out there that, where did this 10,000 steps thing come from? Like, yeah, okay, cool, the pedometer. We can argue all the semantics that we want, but there is research out there that says up until about 13 to 15,000 steps a day, there is massive benefit for your health, massive benefit for longevity. So, yes, movement helps. Movement is medicine. Not moving is what makes you old. You don't get old. I mean, you don't get immobile and sore and weak because you age. You're aging because you're losing strength, and because you're not moving your body, and because you're believing social media. And something that I'm going to go back to your main question that you asked me 1 second ago before, because it's so important. What is the main benefit menopausal with strength training? Because over the age of 30, you start to lose muscle, you start to lose metabolism every single year. If you're not actively trying to stop that from happening, if you're not actively building muscle, eating protein, staying active. So strength training becomes even more important to stop the natural loss of muscle over time. So it's up to you. Do you want to put in the time to build up your shield of armor as you age? Or do you want to believe social media? Because this is what actually shits me. I did a video with Alan Aragon as like a, a real thing from my podcast. I had two women comment on it saying, why would I listen to someone who looks like they're nowhere near menopause? And why would I listen to a man telling me what to do? And I'm like, well, you tell me how it's worked for you before. Listening to people who look like they tick the boxes of credibility because they're in their 50s, but really they're charlatans selling you something that is going to make them money and leave you struggling again. And I had a couple of people message me saying, you're actually really correct. I only had probably 3 people comment that, and 2 of them messaged me saying, actually, yeah, you're right about that.
Yeah. I get it, though. Like, I was saying this to someone yesterday. Like, the menopause is scary as hell. Like, I don't think anyone would, like, disagree with that. Like, your body fundamentally is changing whether you want it to or not, and that comes along with a ton of symptoms, like the hot flashes, the brain fog, the lack of sleep, like all of this loss of energy, the loss of motivation, dips in mood. Like, it's really difficult. And then if you find someone who gives you an answer to that, even if it's a bullshit answer, if that answer answers some questions and it ties things up in a box and it gives you a sense of comfort because you understand it, I absolutely appreciate defending that. And I 100% accept that there'll be people listening to this podcast who, because I'm a guy, if I've challenged something, you'd be like, go fuck yourself. Like, I've got this thing, and what the fuck do you know? You're a bloke. And you know what? Fine. Like, that's all right. Like, if you want to dismiss what I'm saying because I'm a guy, that's fine. It's kind of why I'm trying to bring research in. I've got a few more papers that I want to talk about. But the ultimate message that I think that women in and around menopausal age need to hear, and this is true no matter who's telling you, is that the menopause is gonna happen. You can manage your symptoms without doing anything weird or particularly expensive, and you can thrive past this point. Like, your life isn't over, your life isn't finished, and while things might be different, you don't have to radically change what you're doing. You don't have to buy certain supplements. You don't have to do special like hormone regulation protocols. What all of the evidence suggests is that you need to keep eating well. You need to avoid radically undereating as well as avoid radically overeating, and you need to stay active and lift weights. And if you can do that, while it will be more difficult during menopause, you have to accept that your energy levels will be up and down. You have to accept that your mood will be up or down. There'll be some weeks that you just can't be bothered with it. But over the few years that menopause is happening, and especially post-menopause, if you can do what you can, you'll be in a better position than you otherwise would be. And most other things is a sales pitch.
Something you just said there. I am a guy. I will have people come at me by some things I counter argued. So that's why I have a lot of research open. Isn't it a sad case that people who have the credibility and have the knowledge base to speak on such topics in a way that's going to help you become your best version of yourself need to go to these extreme lengths to prove themselves worthy of it? But charlatans out there, just because they're of the age group, can easily just swipe past. Like, it's ridiculous that that's the case. Like,
Yeah,
the
but
case
I think
today.
yeah, but that's always the case. It's the case in every realm. If you get someone who knows an awful lot about building muscle, but they don't have a lot of muscle, then they need to back themselves up a lot more than the big guy in the gym who's just been on steroids for 20 years. Like, it's just how brains work. Like, we have a lot of heuristics, we have a lot of shortcuts, and we have a lot of cognitive biases that predispose us in certain directions. Like, it's the way it is. I think as a person who tries to do information on the internet, you just kind of have to accept it. But so there are 3 studies that I always come back to when it comes to the menopause. There are 3 primary things that I think construct a broad argument. The first one is this paper called Daily Energy Expenditure Through the Human Life Course by Ponser and colleagues. What they found is that your metabolic rate, so the number of calories that you burn per day at rest, is pretty much reflective of the amount of lean body mass that you have between the ages of 20 and 60, whether you're a man or a woman. So what that means is that as you go through the menopause, which will be for some women in their 20s, some women in their 30s, but it's usually like 40s and 50s. As you go through the menopause, your metabolic rate does not decrease unless you lose muscle mass during that time. Now, you are predisposed to losing muscle mass during that time because of a reduction in estrogen, but that is counteracted when you lift weights. You can protect your muscle mass by lifting weights. You can protect your muscle mass by eating protein. When people say that women during the menopause lose muscle mass, they're talking about, on average, sedentary women in research. Because if you measure sedentary men and sedentary women will lose muscle mass more quickly. If you look at training populations, that is not the case. So if you're lifting weights, ideally pre-menopause, but during the menopause, you'll protect your muscle mass, which will keep your metabolic rate nice and high. And then from that point on, of course, the rest is down to activity. So yeah, what they found was that fat-free mass adjusted expenditure, so how much lean body mass you've got, like how much muscle functionally, is really, really fast when you're a baby growing up to an adult, because of course it is, you're going through development, and then it stays stagnant as you're an adult, and then it starts dipping off after your 60s. And again, a lot of that was to do with metabolic efficiency, which is what Ruby was talking about earlier. That can be counteracted by exercise. So first part of the argument, if you exercise, if you maintain muscle mass, your metabolic rate won't go down during the menopause. The next argument that I put forward is the efficacy of strength training for reducing the symptoms of menopause, a systematic review by Capel Alcaraz and colleagues, published in 2023. What they found, and I quote, is there is evidence that strength exercise can be beneficial for improving strength, physical activity, meaning that you move around more day to day, you're not as like inactive because you've got a little bit more muscle mass, you've got a little bit more strength. So strength, physical activity, bone density, and hormonal and metabolic levels. So what that means is that even if you've never trained before, if you start lifting during menopause, it will help to not minimize necessarily, but it will help to manage your symptoms alongside other things, whether you're talking like HRT or possibly therapy. Some women use antidepressants and so on. But physical activity, especially lifting weights, will help to alleviate some of your menopausal symptoms alongside maintaining the muscle mass, which is going to help keep your metabolic rate nice and high. And then the next one that I like to use is this, which is one of my favorite papers ever from 1990. High intensity strength training in nonagenarians effects on skeletal muscle mass. So a nonagenarian is someone in their 90s. Okay. So this paper took 10 frail institutionalized volunteers. So these are elderly people in like an elderly home. 6 of them were women, 4 of them were men. They were over 90 years old and none of them were doing any exercise. They did 8 weeks of high intense exercise. All they did was leg extensions. So for 8 weeks, 3 times a week, they got on a leg extension machine and pushed really hard. Over time, they built a ton of muscle mass. Their gait speed increased by 48%, meaning they were able to move faster. And some of them didn't have to use wheelchairs anymore after 8 weeks of just leg extensions. Now, what this paper demonstrates is that irrespective of anything that someone will say on like a bullshit podcast or will write in a book about how you need special protocols and you need to optimize your nutrition intake, and if you don't do the right program, it's not going to work. Even just doing leg extensions when you're 90, having never trained before, is good for you to the point that it will help improve your mobility, it will help build muscle mass in that localized area, and it will improve your quality of life. And so across these 3 papers, the picture that we've got is that if you're coming up to menopausal age, you're not doomed to having a low metabolic rate. You just need to lift weights. If you do lift weights, it's going to improve your menopausal symptoms anyway, so you kind of might as well. And there's literally not a point where it ever gets too late to start, and you don't even need to complicate it. Just go to the gym and train really hard on whatever you feel comfortable doing, and over time you'll get the benefit.
Yeah, and I do have to say, if you are one of those people who are very worried, so to speak, of moving into this period of your life with your with your training, and you're feeling niggles here and there, you're feeling your bones like this, your joints like that, this is why you need a coach. I would very much argue for it, because things, yes, they're a little bit different now for the fact that you have a lot more stresses around you. And if you are going through that menopausal stage of your life, things need to be more tailored to you and your ability to recover to that stressor, to be able to work with you and your symptoms. And like the whole plyometrics thing that you mentioned as well, that I mentioned that you like as well, those kind of not factors, what do you call them? Those elements that you can put into a program to help enhance your experience are going to benefit you long term. And this is also something you mentioned before, actually the leg extensions thing. If you look at the typical 60-year-old of the 1990s, not 60-year-old, 60-year-old in the 1990s, the shape they used to resemble is there was like this huge upper body, tiny little legs, tiny arms, sometimes tiny arms, but mostly tiny legs. That, if you can imagine that kind of like toppling over effect, that isn't something that's going to sustain you long term. Like, you're going to fall, you're going to hurt yourself, you're going to be imbalanced, you're going to have postural issues. But if you're building your legs up, and women are most afraid of their legs feeling bulky, you're not going to be afraid of that when you age and you realize that you have muscle mass that supports you going up steps, that supports you moving around, where you can burn so many more calories because, hello, like Tom said, you have the muscle mass to move around, and muscle mass demands energy. Your body is going to supply to meet its demand. Economics, come on, there's more demand, then there's going to have to be some form of giving more supply. But I really wanted to touch on the hormonal benefits of this because you mentioned estrogen, and that's what I wanted to go to. Estrogen is essential for heart health, it's essential for brain health, and it's essential for bone health. You also mentioned brain fog. Brain fog, brain health, bone health, heart health, estrogen. Guess what helps with all of that? There is this little magical molecule called BDNF. There are other magic molecules called myokines. Guess where they stem from? BDNF stems from aerobic exercise, aka doing the cardio, as well as strength training. And myokines come from healthy skeletal muscle, aka the muscles that you are wanting to shape up and have look all nice and feminine. Like, most of you want to freaking look good. Like, let's just say it. You're not going to get there if you're not going to be putting in the work to be building those muscles. And as we started the conversation off, you need to train hard. And it is hard to train hard if you are scared of injury because your program isn't number one designed for you. But also if you're doing way too much work, not eating enough food or protein to recover from it, or believe that you need to train 6 to 7 days a week to see results because the more exercise you do, the more calories you burn, which no. And the more training you do, the more, like, I had someone come to me a while ago when I wrote a program, and she admitted to me that she was adding things on at the end of every single session. I'm like, why? Oh, because I get it done in 30 minutes. How are you getting that done in 30 minutes? Like, that you need to be treating those sets like actual take them to failure working sets. This is something that I still have not. Yeah, I'm going to let you say your spiel, but this is something go.
And that's hard to do. It's hard to learn. I appreciate that. Like, I don't think that if you're listening to this and you've only been lifting weights for a couple of weeks and you're like, oh, I think I trained really hard, but I'm not sure if I pushed to failure. Maybe not. It's something that you will learn to do. It's something that you get better at. I mean, Ruby, do you have a strategy for helping people learn what failure feels like?
I like to say, I have two strategies actually. I like to say this is going to touch into that 12 to 15 reps. A lot of people don't treat 12 to 15 reps the way they should. They see 12 to 15 reps, okay, lightweight. No, 12 to 15 reps is probably the most grueling thing you'll have to do because that means you'll be doing a lot more reps that are taking you to a failure point. And that is grueling and exhausting. And if you're not doing that because you don't know how to take yourself to that level, one thing you can do is, I have two strategies. The first one is on the last set, do an AMRAP of that weight. See what you can handle. See how many reps you get. Or alternatively, on the last set, increase the weight and see how many reps you get. Most of the time, I find that my ladies say, what the hell? How did you know that I could do more weight on my last set? I actually had someone say to me, for the last 2 weeks, I've been getting more every single third set. I don't know how you knew that I could do that. I'm like, because I know that you don't take them close enough to failure. And if you're able to do that, then we have to talk about warm-up sets. And I would be addressing your warm-up sets, making sure you're doing those. Those are my three strategies. The warm-up sets are bonus. What about you?
Yeah, I really like the AMRAP idea. So what I'll usually do is, if you've never pushed to failure, I would get you on. It's usually a chest press that I use, but you need to find a machine that's like safe for you to fail on. And I want you to do your usual set of like 6 to 10 and record the weight and record the reps that you do. And then I want you to lock in. So get your headphones on, put on some highly motivational music that you enjoy. And I want you to take that exercise to absolute positive failure. So absolute positive failure is the point where you are pushing as hard as you can and the weight will not move. So I don't mean you're pushing as hard as you can and it moves really slowly. I don't mean that you're pushing as hard as you can and your chest is burning an awful lot. I mean that you physically can't lift it anymore, as if someone's like tripled the weight and you're trying to like push a car. Now, it might take you a couple of goes to get yourself to that point, because there is a degree of tolerating discomfort that you have to kind of get through. There's a degree of that you have to learn. But invariably, in my experience, someone that I'm working with who has been training hard, and I don't think you're lying, like I think you have been training hard. I just think your perception of training hard is different. Oftentimes I'll see them get 20 odd reps. And like the first time that you push yourself to absolute positive failure, you'll be like, oh, okay. And I'm not saying that one set will teach you anything, because it won't. But if you repeat that AMRAP every single week and you start to learn, right, this is what it feels like to really push myself. When you then take that to a pull down, or when you take it to a dumbbell press, or when you take it to some lateral raises or a leg press, you'll start thinking, right, where is my intensity at? And what you'll often find is that previously, when you were doing 4 sets of 8 to 15 on 7 different exercises, like 2 sets of 4 exercises becomes a session. Like, it's enough. And I'm not saying every set has to be to absolute failure. In fact, I think most sets shouldn't be. But I think it's useful for you to calibrate how hard you're training, because you should be stopping 1, maybe 2 reps short of that failure point. And it's useful to calibrate where it is semi-frequently. So I just like to include an AMRAP at least once per block.
Yeah. One thing I will say to the failure part is a lot of people don't actually understand what failure means, where what Tom is describing is a failure that I love. As soon as he said, the way to know that you're pushing to failure is to do it, I was going to say, you mean to chuck a Ruby? Yeah, that would probably do the job. But honestly, if you see it as form failure, I would say take every single set to form failure, because form failure doesn't technically mean the muscle in itself is failing. It means that you cannot get proper form for that last rep. But if you want to learn...
I was going to say, that's why I would always recommend that you do that failure test on something where you don't have to worry about form. So use a chest press, use like a bicep curl machine, use something where you're locked into a very good position, and so you can't really have technical breakdown, and it has to be just like muscular breakdown.
I love the fact that you added that in, because that actually adds to the next point, like really adds to the next point. I'm going to reiterate that part. Form failure, do it every single set, because that shows you that you are pushing hard enough and getting effective reps. Now, doing what Tom said, on that very thing, something else that I love to challenge, so this is the 4th thing, I want you to aim for an 8-second rep. An 8-second rep. Make that last rep 8 seconds. So it's not just like, I can't get it for. No, it's, I want to see you grind for 8 seconds. Show me that you can't do it. Show me that you can't do it. And this is where it comes down to what I mentioned before. This is why a lot of women feel like it doesn't work, or that they need to change their training up. It's because you've never been taught how to do it properly. You've never been taught how to brace. You've never been taught how to use your whole body in like every movement. You should be using your upper body in most lower body movements. Nearly every single lower body movement. In a leg press, I'm locking in. I use straps. I'm getting tight in that leg press. When I'm doing my squats, actually, definitely when you're doing your squats, you can't squat without your upper body being there. Like, you need to learn how to engage your whole body, how to engage your core, because it's only then that you can keep adding the reps and have continual progress in a way that you're going to see change. And then you can effectively push yourself to failure without worrying about the niggles. And if someone does have niggles, how do you usually portray that? Because I want you to
When somebody has niggles, what do you mean?
Yeah, like the way that, because you need to set it up to create that foundation, yes, but then if someone's at a point where we need to now make them okay and realize we need to do this right now, we need to take away the perception of, because a lot of people feel like actually this will be two different things. There is the mobility and the issues that people usually bring up when they're in that stage of life, but bringing into it, take training to failure. If, for example, there's a type of squat at the end of your training program, which sometimes there will be, there's backloading, there's reasons to put things where they are. Just because there is something that says 6 to 8 reps or 4 to 6 reps, or it's a compound movement at the end of the exercise, it doesn't mean that train to failure or 6 to 8 reps means send it to absolute oblivion. You need to use the heaviest weight possible for the 6 to 8 reps. It's like, well, no, you need to take it into consideration for where that exercise is within the training program. If you have squats somewhere at the end and it's 5 to 8 reps, and if squats are at the beginning and you typically do that using an easy number, you typically do that with 100 kilos, but now it's at the end. Take it to failure. Does that mean use 100 kilos? No, it means you need to put it into the context. Do your warm-up sets to find your working weight and then find your effective weight.
Yeah, exactly that. Like, there's just always have like 1 or 2 sets. Like usually you'll need 1 set to just kind of, I just call them calibration sets. So I know for a fact, for example, that I can leg press an awful lot more if I leg press as the first exercise versus if I squat and then do RDLs and then do leg press. So if I'm leg pressing as a third exercise, I'm not going to even attempt to do the weight that I would do if I was fresh, because I'm not fresh anymore. Like, it's just, do a weight that's sort of, you'll know roughly what you'll use on that exercise typically. Put like 50-60% of that weight on the bar, do a set, and then just be honest. just be honest with where you're at.
Yeah, I was going to say, for some of my ladies that have little niggles around, like, it's not even to do with age. Most women have some form of knee issue. We have wider hips, so our knees tend to knock in, but also the way that we've been brought up to be so body conscious, the way that our posture has been sort of caved in like this has led us to have dysfunctional movement patterns, or cardio was the thing without doing any base of strength work. So we just ended up with bonged up knees, all kinds of different reasons. But the point being, if I know that I don't want you to be loading an exercise that heavy because I don't want it to cause an issue, I'm putting that exercise at the end. I have quite a few ladies that have squats at the very end of their workout because I want to limit the weight that they are using for that exercise, but it still be effective to a point of failing it, just with a much lighter load. And same with the 6 to 8 reps. I might say, okay, I want a 3-second pause at the bottom to naturally have the load reduce, so that you're not getting this massive tax of a huge weight on you, but it is still having an effective training effect. Yeah. What would you do about that? The whole, like, if someone does have a lot of the niggles.
Yeah, so typically if I've got someone who's got a niggle on a certain movement, the way that you do it works just fine. I would typically do it very differently. I would generally have that movement like first or second in the session. And I would leave the loading parameters entirely down to the client. So let's say I've got the typical one, someone's got lower back pain. And it's going to be a lower body-ish session. We'll start off with a movement that allows them to explore the range that is really uncomfortable. So it might be like a seated good morning, or it might be some kind of like 45-degree back extension. And you would just do that movement just to the point where it starts to get a little bit uncomfortable. That's your range of motion, and you're going to do some reps. I don't care how many you do. The important thing is you almost think of it kind of like a stretch, that we're just taking just to that point of discomfort and then moving away, and we're just doing what I refer to as nudging into the pain. Then I would put the movement in that pisses their back off, so a squat, a deadlift, something like that. And again, we will be doing like 4 or 5 sets of 4 to 6 reps, and I want you to lift a weight that you feel comfortable lifting. We're going to stay well away from failure. The purpose of this isn't to build muscle. The purpose of this is to build confidence, and it's to build a bodily tolerance to the positions that are currently painful. So for me, for example, about 6 months ago, I tore my glute. I went from doing deadlifts of like sets of 4 to 6 with 220 kilos to I did about 3 weeks where I didn't lift anything over 50 kilos. But I was lifting slowly with control through the full range of motion in a way that was like uncomfortable, but I was teaching my body that these positions are okay. After those first 2 movements, I would then just like go ham on like leg presses, leg extensions, hamstring curls. If the lunge is comfortable, do something like a lunge. So the first 2 movements are like rehabby, and then we would find ways of training the target muscles that don't hurt, and then just go hella heavy on those. And that's typically the way that I would approach like a rehabilitation for a niggle.
Yeah, I would love to be able to give well, I'm going to go back to the knee pain. I'd love to give, because I typically get a lot of people with knee pain. I love to give exercises that we can really use for them to send it without it causing pain, which tends to be a lot of hinge movements, a lot of hamstring movements, which in effect are going to help improve your knee issues, because most people have very underdeveloped hamstrings because no one knows how to hinge properly. No one knows how to leg curl properly. And we just focus either so much on our glutes, or we don't want our legs to get bulky, or we just simply don't. Well, it's not that we don't know how to train. It's there's only really 2 effective things that you can do for your hamstrings, and that's leg curls and hinges. And if you're someone who gets bored of the same shit on repeat, you're not going to be doing the very things that you need to do to grow your hamstrings. So there's that. But yeah, the way that I typically like to do it is something that I love doing is doing a lot of, I can't use that term, side to side movement. I was going to say frontal plane, but I like bringing in some side to side movement to open up the hips and to get you into a position where then I can put you into, for example, a leg press without you feeling all jammed up and it being an issue. I'll get you to do some hamstring exercises before you do your knee focused squatty type of patterns, because then you have a fuller muscle belly behind the knee, which is going to be a buffer. Like, there are all these different things, which brings me back to the whole point. Get a coach if you're having issues with this stuff, because it will solve a lot of issues, and you can relearn how to brace again, just kind of like how I'm having to relearn how to brace again as well now. Like, just because you nailed something once doesn't mean you're immune forever. Sometimes you need to relearn it in a different way.
Yeah, we all build bad habits.
Yeah, so I think that actually what you just said, I'm going to quickly reiterate that part. The longer that you spend time doing things a certain way, which is wrong, the more you're going to re-ingrain, you know what I mean? Ingrain a faulty movement pattern. And the longer that you've been doing a faulty movement pattern, the harder it is for you to relearn it a different way. And if you're going to approach muscle building or training the same way that you approach chasing the scale down and losing fat, you are not going to see any success. You can't rush either of them. And the more that you keep trying to rush the process, the harder you're going to make it for yourself, because there isn't a big enough runway for you to create the progress that you want. Big runways, big planes, big destinations, big awesomeness, and you get some carbs on deck. What do you have to say to sum that up?
I think that's it, to be honest. I think it's just trying to start where you're at is always the best strategy, whether you're premenopausal, postmenopausal, or whether you're an 18-year-old dude. You need to learn how to push yourself in a way that's tolerable. But the faster you can do that, and the faster you can learn how to push hard, and the faster you can learn that fueling yourself is always, and so that you can thrive, is always going to be more beneficial than dieting. As soon as you work those things out, I think you become immune to a lot of the bullshit that you'll read on the internet, because you're already doing the basics that work. And I feel like a lot of the time, the draw towards hormone balance and all of the really like complicated strategies that people will talk about, these things are appealing because you haven't found anything that works yet. But a lot of the time, what I find is that the reason that you haven't found anything that works yet is because you've bypassed the basics. You've bypassed eat 3 to 4 balanced meals a day with plenty of protein and train really hard 3 times a week. Like, if you can nail that down, all of a sudden the complicated bullshit just sounds like noise.
And I understand how hard it is when you're at this stage of your life as well, feeling like, oh, you don't have much time left. You've already wasted all the time. You need to hurry up and get it done. And the thing is, you're going to be saying that same thing every single year. But guess what? You are the youngest you'll ever be this moment right now. So the longer that you keep putting it off because you keep trying to rush the process, or you say, "I'll worry about that later," you're literally repeating the same cycle. It's just like you logically know this, but emotionally you feel like shit and you just want to change. But to change requires a change in process, in method, in mindset, and in your fucking belief in yourself. Like, god damn it, be kind to yourself. The amount of bullshit I hear people just ramble on about themselves, nutters, nutters, I tell you. Wait, how do they say it? They're in the England area where they speak very Englandy English.
I mean, nutters is a word that we'd use. Mental. It's probably a good one.
Mental. But you say it with a better accent, so you can sum it up with that. Don't be mental.
Divin be mental, Mara.
I love you all. I really hope this helps. And yeah, I really need to end this with something that I think is a lot more compelling. So let's bring it back. Let's bring it back. Wait, wrong one. Wrong one. Give me a second. It's coming. Wait, where is it? Wait, where are you? Come on. Nope. No, where is it? It's meant to be the Guess Who's Back, back again. It was meant to be the actual song, but it just did not come up. So, you know,
Edit that later.
he's back. What? He's back.
Cheers, everyone.
Buyers.